Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world to mourn our loss.
Britain and the world's farewell, laying Queen Elizabeth II to rest. And
it's a historical moment.
She has been our queen since I was born, so we want to pay tribute to her.
British Columbians pay their respects. Victoria marks the Queen's funeral with a procession of its own. Plus,
this is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung, and thank you for joining us on this historic day. Britain and the world have said a final goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II, her state funeral drawing presidents and kings, princes and prime ministers, and emotional crowds who massed along the streets of London to honor her and her 70 years on the throne. CBC's Margaret Evans takes us there.
This was a day of heavy tread, etching itself into old stone and the chronicles of history. Britain's farewell for a queen like no other. Elizabeth II's coffin was borne to Westminster Abbey by 142 Royal Navy sailors on a ceremonial gun carriage. The mourning party once more led by her 4 children. Hundreds of world leaders and dignitaries attended the state funeral, testament to the Queen's global reach. Despite the soaring grandeur of the service, the Archbishop of Canterbury sought to define the simple qualities of the woman behind the crown.
But in all cases, those who serve will be loved and remembered when those who cling to power and privileges are long forgotten.
Also in the Abbey, British Prime Ministers past, one of whom once described the Queen as a golden thread running through the generations. The route of her funeral cortege seemed to weave a final tapestry, young and old crowding the avenues and places so familiar to the Queen during a 70-year reign. People watched the funeral on their phones as they waited for the procession to reach them. After more than a week of official mourning, the drum beat of the funeral dirge is by now familiar.
It was very emotional. I think despite seeing the last few days of preparation, I felt definitely a lump in my throat when she went past. It makes you realise she's been there all our life and will ever be the same again.
The first glimpse of the funeral procession for many came in a flash of red, Royal Canadian Mounted Police at its head. Some members of the Order of Canada were also guests at the funeral, part of Canada's delegation.
The moment for me was the first time I sang God Save the King. And I actually made a mistake. Like, just out of my mouth came, at the very end when I stopped reading the lyrics, came God Save the Queen, because it was so natural and intuitive. And I actually kind of burst into a little moment of tears at that. Just sort of thought, wow, I need to catch up.
When the procession reached Hyde Park Corner and the Wellington Arch, the Queen's coffin was transferred to a hearse, one last journey to make, a homecoming of sorts at Windsor Castle. And another service, this one at St. George's Chapel, smaller, more intimate, and more finite, as the instruments of state presented to the Queen at her coronation were removed from the coffin. As it was lowered into the royal vault for a private burial later, a lone piper playing a lament slowly disappeared from view, like a last glimpse of the Queen herself. The mourners inside left to sing the national anthem. King Charles, now the new monarch, but also a son laying his mother to rest.
That was Margaret Evans reporting tonight from London. This historic day also commemorated in Ottawa, a national ceremony honoring the end of the Queen's long life and service to Canada. As CBC's Marina von Stackelberg reports, politicians and dignitaries joined thousands of onlookers to honor the monarch.
On a chilly, rainy afternoon, a solemn parade makes its way past Parliament Hill. Michael and Paula Webster are among hundreds who showed up to pay their respects. They're visiting from the UK and wish they could have been in London for the service there.
It's very sad. It's the end of an era.
Yeah, we've lost our mother.
Yeah, it's quite emotional.
Canadians who don't have close ties to the monarchy still wanted to be here to pay tribute.
I guess she's like a grandmother to everyone in Canada, more or less, in a way. So she's always there. You forget that she's human too. And then one day you realize that she's not here anymore. So it's a bit of a shock to a lot of people that I know.
At Christ Church Cathedral, leaders arrived for a special service. From different political stripes, they sat side by side in pews. As a choir sang the same hymn from the Queen's coronation in 1953, honoring her 70 years as Canada's head of state.
The Queen, her gentleness, her ability to emotionally connect with the common people, her desire to make the world cleaner and safer are truths she carries with her now into the great land of souls.
Former Governor General Adrian Clarkson gave an address on behalf of Canadians.
The life and reign of Elizabeth II has been witness to our struggle, our efforts as Canadians to become what we are meant to be: the true, the North, the free.
And former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney for the Government of Canada.
During her very first visit in 1951, she noted, "From the moment when I set foot at first on Canadian soil, the feeling of strangeness went, for I knew myself to be not only amongst friends, but amongst fellow countrymen."
Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Here at home in BC, a procession made its way through downtown Victoria to commemorate the death of Queen Elizabeth. As Susanna De Silva reports, it followed a 21-gun salute and a multi-faith service at Christ Church Cathedral.
What, about 9:15? We wanted a front row seat.
Bruce Allen wasn't going to risk missing any of today's ceremonies. His connection to England and the Queen as visible as the medals on his chest after 40 years of service in the reserves.
My mother. Oh, yeah. I'm a royalist. She was an ultra-royalist, I'll tell you. Well, she remembers, right, when, King George VI and the Queen Mother, would come through East London after the bombings and walk through and meet the people of London, right? My mother was blitzed out in London, and I'm a royalist. Yeah, so took the grandchildren, brought them down. It's, it's history, right? It's history being made today.
Many others drawn by their own special connections.
In advance of the coronation, of course, my brother and I went from door to door selling the special edition. And so it was a worthwhile activity.
Was there a lot of excitement at that time?
Oh, yes. People really wanted that special edition of the newspaper.
The morning ceremonies began with a procession from the legislature, including the Lieutenant Governor and Premier, with members of the Naden Band of the Royal Canadian Navy and a 100-person honor guard made up of members of the Maritime Forces Pacific, before arriving at the Christ Church Cathedral for a multi-faith service. The Premier also sharing his memories of Her Majesty.
She dropped the puck perfectly, and the crowd went wild. If there was a moment that the Queen captured our hearts, it would have been that day, certainly mine.
The church was full, and those inside were glad to take a moment to reflect on Queen Elizabeth's life.
We're from Hong Kong, and she has been our queen since I was born. So we want to pay tribute to her. It's very touching. I'm very pleased that we have this service here. I'm very grateful that we cannot be in London, but we have the services.
A moment in history shared by those here, including those who won't really understand for a few years. Susanna da Silva, CBC News, Victoria.
Meanwhile, during the day of the Queen's funeral, parents in East Vancouver took the opportunity to draw attention to the role the Crown played in colonization. Organizers wanted to raise awareness, continue efforts towards truth and reconciliation. They said that while the focus has been on the life of the Queen, colonization and subjugation of First Nations in Canada need to be addressed while looking at the legacy of the British royal family.
Not about the person, but about the systems. There's opportunity to reflect, and when we're thinking about mourning, the colonization has gone on for hundreds of years and in a variety of different ways, and let's really keep listening and amplifying perspectives that have not been heard as much.
Organizers hope conversations continue education, leading into the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation next week. Now to an unbelievable scene, a riot at the Peony last night. Chaos and violence erupted after the headliner of a music festival canceled last minute. 7 people have been arrested and a criminal investigation has been launched. The Peony says it's also conducting an investigation as they try to recover hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages done by about 1,000 people. Isabel Regem heard from concert goers who were caught in the middle of the chaos.
Tents and tables flipped over, beverage kiosks raided and pushed to the ground, attendees climbing structures. Dozens of videos posted to social media give us a glimpse into the disorder that erupted Sunday night at Hastings Park on the final day of the Breakout Festival. In the daylight Monday morning, the extent of the damage visible, with crews beginning the long process of cleaning up at the Peony. The venue saying there is hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. Concert goers say what prompted the chaos was the last-minute cancellation of the headliner Lil Baby. Breakout Festival organizers sharing an update late Sunday night, saying the rapper was sick and unable to perform. That's when the mood took a drastic turn from a group of hundreds of excited fans to an angry crowd.
I was unfortunately too sick to perform.
I came for both days, $260. Probably 4 of the artists that I that I bought the ticket for got canceled. And I also ended up getting pepper sprayed and bashed my knee out with the baton. So all around, it wasn't a good night.
Biggest joke of my life. Honestly, you spend $200, $300 to travel, and then you spend all that money on the ticket, and then it's just a wash. Walk away, biggest waste of money in my life.
A spokesperson for the Peony wasn't available for an interview, but tells CBC while staff are shaken, luckily, no one was significantly hurt. Rapper Lil Baby issued an apology via Instagram Monday morning, saying in part that his body completely shut down, adding, "I truly apologize and I owe you guys big time and will for sure make up for it soon." Meanwhile, Breakout Festival organizers issued their own statement Monday, apologizing to fans for the cancellation, but condemning the destruction. It also says the team is working on an update for partial refunds. Vancouver police also said no one was available for an interview, but in a statement says the 7 people arrested were held for breach of the peace and that the criminal investigation will likely take months to complete. Isabel Regam, CBC News, East Vancouver.
BC housing is under fire once again, this time from residents of a group home in New Westminster. The Crown Corporation, which manages subsidized housing for the province, has decided to close Lena's Place next summer. 11 people live there. The families who advocate for them say BC Housing refuses to tell them why the facility can't continue to operate. Belle Puri has the latest in our healthcare series, Situation Critical.
From outings to meal planning, these best friends are partners in everything.
Ooh, are we having potato wedges?
Potato wedges, and you don't want the salad.
No, I don't want the salad.
Tim Williams and Jeff McPherson have been roommates for 4 years in an assisted living facility for people with mental illness. Lena's Place is run by a community living association under contract with Fraser Health in a 21-year-old duplex owned by BC Housing. In July, BC Housing announced Lena's will close next summer because it needs expensive but unspecified repairs.
I would tell BC Housing, what the heck are they doing? to us.
Yeah, like why?
Why are they doing it?
A letter to residents says the closure is based on the need for a newer building and for funding for more choices in housing programs. Music student Allison Chow is another of the 11 people who live at Liena's.
I'm just not very impressed with the way that BC Housing handled this whole thing.
Residents and their families have been told to file a Freedom of Information request for details.
We're wondering why we're being stonewalled. It should be a simple matter of saying, okay, here's the engineering report. It's going to cost more than the building's worth, or it's going to cost $50.
BC Housing has recently been the focus of some heavy scrutiny. On June 30th, the provincial government released a highly critical external review of the Crown Corporation. The report issued 44 recommendations about potential improvements to how BC Housing operates. A week later, 7 of its 12 board members were fired, effective immediately. Families say the Liena's decision is questionable.
On the surface, it appears that the sale of Liena's and the redistribution of the residents is seen as an opportunity to grab some quick cash to paper over some bureaucratic inefficiencies and deficiencies.
Civic leaders have also asked about what Liena's needs fixed, but to no avail.
It would really be nice if Fraser Health and BC Housing came forward with some better information. If adequate information isn't coming forward, then I'll treat it like I would treat it as any other rent eviction situation.
None of the agencies responsible for Liena's and its residents responded to CBC requests for comment.
These are my friends. These are my family. We care about each other.
Yeah, we care.
None of them wants to be split up or forced to leave the place they call home. Belle Puri, CBC News, New Westminster.
From hospital emergency room closures to burnout and family doctor shortages, it's no secret that BC's primary care system is in crisis and patients are paying the price. Tomorrow, join us for Situation Critical, a CBC virtual town hall. Hosts Anita Bath and Belle Puri, whom you've just heard there, will delve into the current state of healthcare, what's not working and what the solutions are. Dial in and hear from panelists Health Minister Adrian Dix, Dr. Ramneek Dosanjh with Doctors of BC, and UBC Professor Dr. Rita McCracken. That's tomorrow, Tuesday, September 20th from 6 to 7 p.m. A BC junior hockey team has been fined and 2 of its players have been suspended following allegations of hazing. The captain of the Creston Valley Thundercats has been suspended for 12 games for violating the league's conduct policy. The team's alternate captain has also been suspended for 6 games. The team will also have to pay a fine. The incident was first reported last Tuesday. Following that, the Kootenay International Junior Hockey League suspended team activities and interviewed players as well as staff. The league commissioner has called the incident unacceptable and says the team has considerable work to do. The team will play its first regular season game on Friday. A BC teacher says he's disturbed and stunned by unsolicited photos he received from a Richmond school trustee candidate this week. He says the pictures were of a trans youth pre- and post-operation. Yasmin Gandam has the details.
I don't know what made him think that I needed to see this.
Confusion after BC teacher Mark Reed says he received photos from school board trustee candidate Dean Billings just after midnight on Friday, followed by messages saying this is an image of what you're supporting.
Twitter messages sent in the middle of the night with someone else's content and really brief or few words to go with them is not a dialogue.
Billings is publicly pushing for reform of SOGI in schools, resources for teachers and students about sexual orientation and gender identity. It's a policy that aims to improve the climate in schools for LGBTQ+ youth by reducing discrimination and harassment. Reed says he doesn't support the candidate's vision.
This isn't something that I want to have as a part of the philosophy or policy direction in a school district.
In a statement to CBC, Billings said, in part, the images sent were from an existing tweet that he forwarded, adding most people he's spoken to in Richmond have no idea that minors can consent to gender-affirming care and what it really entails, and awareness is an issue for him. Advocates for the trans community say it's concerning to have a school board trustee candidate sending these images and pushing for SOGI reform.
When we talk about harming trans youth in this capacity, we're talking about keeping trans
kids from playing sports, from being able to join extracurricular activities, join a swimming team, be on a baseball team, that sort of thing. And that to me is, detrimental to like their physical health, ability to make friendships, all that sort of stuff.
Billings is not the only candidate running on SOGI reform. Shannon Boschy and Karen Litchik are two others with similar platforms.
I have no idea what some of these candidates think that they will achieve if they're elected in whatever school district, whatever municipality they're in. I wonder sometimes how much they actually know what goes on in the school system.
All 60 school districts, independent and Indigenous schools, have SOGI inclusive codes of conduct and policies in place, and many are participants in the BC SOGI Educator Network. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
A sentencing hearing is expected to begin today for a Dutch national convicted for the online extortion of Amanda Todd. She was 15 years old when she died by suicide a decade ago after 3 years of exploitation by Aiden Coban. Renee Filipponi has a look at what to expect.
The sentencing will take place over a number of days this week. Both Crown and defense lawyers will make submissions to the court and recommendations about how long the sentence should be. Amanda Todd's mother, Carol, will also be given the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. Now, the crimes Coban has been found guilty of carry a maximum penalty ranging from 10 years for harassment to life in prison for extortion. Todd was a teenager when she was harassed and extorted online by Dutch citizen Aiden Coban for a period of 3 years. The jury trial lasted 9 weeks and involved dozens of witnesses and experts from Canada and the Netherlands. Last month, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict convicting him of extortion, harassment, and possession and distribution of child pornography. Legal experts say there are few precedents for cases like this, so predicting the type of sentence he will face is difficult.
This type of case doesn't often get into sentencing because a lot of times the police can't identify who the person is behind the communications, or there's certain pieces of evidence that are lost or can't be retrieved. So it's just the child saying that this happened, but the communications themselves can't be retrieved. In this case, they have all of that information. So the sentence that is imposed in this case will be very important as a future precedent.
Coban has not been charged over Todd's death in 2012. Throughout the trial, his lawyers disputed the allegations he was behind the accounts that harassed her. He was extradited from the Netherlands to Canada in December 2020 and has been in custody here since. The judge is expected to deliver the sentence later this week, a decision Coban will have the chance to appeal. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
A pair of disastrous storms struck opposite corners of North America over the weekend, leaving Puerto Rico and coastal Alaska residents reeling after the worst flooding in decades. Multiple homes were destroyed and power outages were reported in western Alaska. Hundreds were forced to evacuate to safer ground Saturday as the storm raged. Flood and high wind warnings were issued in several coastal areas. In Nome, water levels reached 3 meters above normal. The governor declaring the crisis a disaster emergency. And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. So, Joe, wow, really, shocking pictures to see, and exactly almost as you and others forecasted.
Yeah, this certainly was an historic storm in the end, Leanne. And even, 3 days later, we're still getting a handle on just how damaging this storm was for local infrastructure. I want to take you to the watches and warnings that are still in place. Again, 3 days later, we're still looking at aerial flooding, inland wind advisories, gale warnings for the Aleutian Islands, all as the storm weakens. It's spinning in place, not tracking into Canada, but it is amplifying our jet stream, which I'll talk about in a minute. But still a lot of questions about what this will mean for communities' futures, especially as we head into the winter with a lot of their food and energy supplies damaged because of that storm. We'll be watching that story closely. As I mentioned, it did amplify our jet stream, and that has meant a very strong high pressure system that's now in place. It moved in on Sunday, and we have summer weather for the next few days. Even though it'll feel like summer, we know it's starting to get to the next season. Fire danger ratings in place, but tomorrow at noon, the coastal fire ban will be lifted. That's been in place since August 4th. That will no longer be in place. So, Leanne, any fall campers, that's some good news there. And I've got the summer forecast. into the fall equinox coming up.
Okay, all right, we'll check in a bit. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Do you need a family doctor? Is your small town emergency room closed regularly? Have you heard horror stories of long waits for ambulances? A look ahead at Situation Critical, CBC's virtual town hall after the break. And thank you for watching our commercial-free live stream. On this historic day, let's head back to Victoria for more sights and sounds of the ceremony held today to honor the Queen.
Her Majesty's life, lived in the public eye, made us all witness to the universal touchstones of human life. Birth, marriage, parenthood, aging, and death.
For more than 70 years, Her Majesty lived by a simple vow: I serve. Service was the foundation of her time, 7 decades, as our monarch, and the Queen made that promise at her coronation in 1952, and she kept it her entire life.
It's not acceptable that people should be having to do this.
I'm Belle Puri. Join Anita Bath and me as we host Situation Critical, a special virtual town hall addressing healthcare. Tune in September 20th on all CBC platforms.
We know British Columbia is in the midst of a healthcare crisis, from family doctor shortages to extended wait times and emergency room closures. Tomorrow at this time, we'll bring you Situation Critical, CBC's virtual town hall focusing on the crisis. Health Minister Adrian Dix will be there. So will family physician and UBC Assistant Professor Dr. Rita McCracken, and she joins us now just ahead of that town hall. Dr. McCracken, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So what will you be looking for during tomorrow's discussion to start off?
I think the big thing on my mind is We have over 1 million people who don't have access to primary care right now. And I want to know how the solutions that are being considered are going to be evaluated so that we'll know if more people are able to access primary care and if the care that they're accessing is of the quality that it needs to be.
Yeah, the town halls are always so great to hear from the public in a very direct way. And we know these issues can't be fixed overnight. They're huge ones. But what isn't working as you're in your practice? What are you finding?
Well, there's a couple of things. So one, for myself personally as a family doctor, I am finding that the amount of administrative work that I need to do in addition to the doctoring work has been significantly increasing, certainly with the move to using telehealth and virtual platforms. We've seen, in addition, I've done a lot of faxing over the last couple or 2 years. And that is simply taking away time that I could be spending on seeing more patients. And so how we fix that, that is a complicated solution that needs a lot of people at the table to make sure that we do it right. Just simply giving me more money as a family doctor is not going to help fix that. We need to have real teams to be able to support the people who need to do the doctoring and the nurse practitionering.
And so speaking of the people that will be at the table tomorrow, Health Minister Adrian Dix, a major player in helping to solve this healthcare crisis, is there something in particular that you want to make sure you get across to him tomorrow?
Yeah, the need for coordination that goes beyond just a conversation between doctors and the ministry. That's a really important conversation. And absolutely, doctors like myself and others who are providing primary care have a really important objective view of things, but it's not the only one. There's also people in the community, also other team members like nurses, nurse practitioners, really important community workers who help us address the social determinants of health as well. We need everybody to be having that conversation. And I'm a little worried that it appears like a lot of the conversations are taking place just between the ministry and doctors.
Okay. All right. Well, lots to dive into tomorrow. Thank you so much, Dr. Rita McCracken, for taking the time to chat with us today. I look forward to your conversation tomorrow.
Thank you.
And Dr. McCracken is one of the panelists tomorrow on Situation Critical, a CBC virtual town hall. Hosts Anita Bath and Belle Puri will examine the current state of healthcare with panelists, including Health Minister Adrian Dix and Dr. Ramnik Dosanjh with Doctors of BC. That's on tomorrow from 6 to 7 p.m. I hope you'll join us. President Biden has stated the pandemic is over, but is it? We break down the ongoing state of a long global crisis next.
Okanagan farmers admit this demonstration was a media event, staged purely and simply to get the federal government's attention. They even had the RCMP's cooperation. But the financial crisis they face is real. They are all deeply in debt. They say cheap fruit imported from the United States and Mexico is driving Canadian farmers bankrupt. So early this morning, they stopped work, formed a convoy of nearly 300 tractors, and plugged all the main highways of the Okanagan Valley for half a day. One farmer said it was worth grinding 5 years of rubber off his tires to make a point. Fruit growers here in Canada pay workers' compensation, unemployment, and Canada pension benefits. Mexican and American farmers do not. Farm workers in the States are paid lower wages, so Canadian consumers buy the cheaper American produce. Production costs are so low in China that canned peaches come all the way across the Pacific, use the Okanagan name, and still undercut the price of homegrown fruit.
It doesn't take much imagination or figuring to see that the primary producer is in hot water.
This tractor protest may have been staged mostly for television cameras, but back down the valley there's a graphic picture of just how desperate some of these farmers really are. Bill Ritchie says he's got no choice. He's taken a bulldozer to his orchard, destroying trees that took 25 years to cultivate because he just cannot afford to take care of the crop anymore.
These crazy farmers will work 15 hours a day if there's any money in it. But they're becoming terribly disheartened with the situation the way it is now. And I look for this to spread right across this country, and I'll bet you, come election time, there'll be a change. Somebody's going to get the boot.
And Ritchie's not the only one. Chainsaws are chewing up the Okanagan Valley as farmers everywhere desperately try to cut their losses. Jerry Thompson, CBC News, near Penticton.
U.S. President Joe Biden shocked people when he declared the pandemic is over on American television last night. He says while COVID is still a problem, the pandemic as we knew it is done. As Katie Simpson reports, the medical community disagrees.
It's never a great day for a leader when your comments require clarification. As President Joe Biden returns to the U.S., that is the predicament he faces.
I think the president was reflecting what so many Americans are feeling and thinking.
At a booster shot clinic, the Health and Human Services Secretary walked back Biden's statement that the pandemic is over.
We still must be aware.
While the chief medical advisor to the president did the same.
We are not where we need to be if we're going to be able to, quote, live with the virus, because we know we're not going to eradicate it.
Biden was touring the Detroit Auto Show last week when he made the remarks during an interview with the news program 60 Minutes, which didn't air until Sunday night.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
The U.S. is averaging 391 daily COVID deaths, a dramatic drop from the worst of the pandemic. And while outcomes have improved, Biden's words are being seen as deeply unhelpful.
The biggest concern is it's not true. The pandemic is still very much with us.
There is worry Biden's dismissal of the pandemic will hurt vaccination efforts.
Why would parents want to vaccinate their kids? Why would adults want to take their boosters if the president is saying that the pandemic's over?
Biden's comments do not appear to signal any sort of change at the White House. The COVID strategy will reportedly stay the same, and the public health emergency remains in effect. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The military commander who once led Canada's COVID vaccine rollout went on trial for sexual assault today. Major General Danny Fortin was one of the senior leaders who came under scrutiny during the military's sexual assault crisis. Fortin has denied any wrongdoing. As Ashley Burke reports, today was the first time details of the allegations were made public. And a warning, the story contains sexually graphic details that may be disturbing to some.
Major General Danny Fortin arrived at court wearing his military medals with his wife by his side.
and maintained his plea not guilty, as the details of the allegations against him were made public for the first time. The complainant at the center of the case testified that in 1988, she was an 18 or 19-year-old student at Royal Military College St. John. She said she woke up in the middle of the night and was horrified. She said Fortin was holding her hand on his genitals and using it to masturbate. The woman claims that Fortin was using his other hand to grope her chest. She testified that she tried to move her hand away, but that Fortin tightened his grip and kept going. She said she told Fortin to leave her alone before he did exit the room. The woman said that she immediately recognized Fortin because they were acquaintances in the same squadron, but he was a year ahead of her. The woman identified Fortin in the courtroom and said he looked the same. During cross-examination, Fortin's lawyer questioned what she said were discrepancies in what the woman told military police during interviews. The complainant testified that she stayed quiet about the allegations for decades because she was ashamed, embarrassed, and witnessed other women in the military face reprisals for reporting sexual misconduct allegations. She said last year, during the height of the military sexual misconduct crisis, she trusted the reporting system in place, and that's why she came forward. The case is back here in court tomorrow. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Gatineau, Quebec.
Hurricane Fiona has ripped over the island of Puerto Rico, leaving destruction in its wake. Where it's headed next and why some Canadians are worried. That's coming up. And it's 6:40 p.m. There's your live look at Prince George tonight. A warm, clear day in the central interior, but those nighttime temperatures definitely showing a crisp is in the air. Johanna has your full province-wide forecast next.
Let me ask you a question. How many of you would trade places with a black person in this society? Raise your hand.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, it's yes or no. How many of you would do it?
I know I would. I mean, I dated a Hispanic, very dark.
No, I'm not talking about Hispanic. The question is.
But I was going to have children. So I spent many years thinking of myself of having very dark-skinned children.
The question is, how many of you would be willing to trade places in this society with a black person?
I think I would.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not saying there's not racism. Absolutely not. It's just saying I don't see it.
Yeah, but you know how racist this country is.
Not to the degree that you do.
Oh, no, you will never know. You know, in this country, we created the criminalization of black people. And when your skin is seen as a weapon, you're never unarmed. And that's why black boys and men and women are dying in the street with their hands up.
Roller coasters might seem scary, but did you know they're designed using the basic rules of physics? And physics is the science of how things move. Most roller coasters begin on a vertical lift. Using a chain, the lift hill hauls the train up to the coaster's highest point. From there, gravity pulls the train down the first drop, and then speed and momentum take over. It's like riding a bike up a hill and then going down. This is called kinetic energy, and it's physics at work. Using the kinetic energy from that first vertical drop, the train has enough momentum to be pushed through the whole track. There are two main types of roller coasters, made of either wood or steel. Wooden coasters are built with a crosswork of supporting beams, and they tend to offer a bumpier ride. On the other hand, steel coasters require fewer supporting beams, and they're able to use a bigger variety of loops, twists, and turns. Every roller coaster has its own layout and unique elements. This makes for all sorts of variations. There are flying, stand-up, and even inverted types of coasters. An inverted coaster means the car hangs below the track, leaving the rider's feet to dangle. Then add in moves like twisting loops, rolls, bunny hops, and big drops. And you can understand why roller coasters continue to be so popular.
Hurricane Fiona made landfall over the Dominican Republic today, and it's expected to intensify as it continues on a northward path in the Atlantic Ocean. The storm is still hitting parts of Puerto Rico a day after reaching the island. As Cameron McIntosh reports, the governor is calling the damage catastrophic.
At first light, the first attempts at cleanup after winds packing 140 kilometers an hour swept the island, scattering trees and power lines, initially knocking out power to more than 3 million people. While flooding from up to 76 centimeters of rain in some places wiped out critical roads and connections, including this bridge installed after Hurricane Maria. Hospitals evacuated, while many people fled their homes. We're here because the house is in a flood zone and it's not in very good condition, says Indua Correa Gonzalez, in a shelter with his mother. I'm worried because it's an old house and it needs repairs. We'll see what happens. Damage, injuries are just starting to be assessed. It'll take days to fully restore power on an island still recovering from 2017's Hurricane Maria, which struck 5 years ago this week, killing more than 3,000 people and wiping out the power grid. Officials say lessons were learned there. Emergency provisions have been stashed around the island, including water. Hundreds of thousands are currently without. Still, by early assessments, the damage won't be as bad as 2017.
We're basically responding at this point. The next step will be recovery. We're not there yet.
That's not to say it's not severe. Flooding along the Guanibo River is already higher than 2017, up 5 meters in just 24 hours.
Unfortunately, the situation in Puerto Rico is not good and not looking to improve until later today when these bands finally start to pull away.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating relief in the American territory. Still, Fiona is far from done, also making landfall in the Dominican Republic. The hurricane expected to only pick up power as it tracks north towards Bermuda later this week. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 7.6 magnitude earthquake shook western Mexico today. The tremor sent residents out into the streets looking for safety. There are no initial reports of structural damage. Today is the anniversary of 2 devastating previous earthquakes in Mexico. In 1985, thousands of people died, and in 2017, 350 people were killed. Joe, we haven't done an earthquake story in a while, and always a reminder of the potential risk that we have here on the West Coast.
Yeah, you said it. We are in a highly seismically active area here on the West Coast, and it was also a subduction zone that prompted that earthquake in southwestern Mexico, a similar subduction zone. This was a megathrust earthquake similar to what will strike off our West Coast one day. I want to show you, though, where that epicenter is. About 450 kilometers southwest of Mexico City, magnitude 7.6, as you mentioned, very shallow, just 15 kilometers. This was what we call an interface megathrust earthquake. This is an area of high seismic activity, and there is no significance to September 19th, even with those eerie connections. There is no earthquake season, but aftershocks expected. But as you said, Leanne, always a good reminder when we do talk about international earthquakes to get our own kits and plans ready. Taking us back to current temperatures, and summer is still on for the next couple of days. 23 right now in Abbotsford. It's a 17 in through YVR. The sun sort of dipping down below the mountains, so we're losing temperatures quickly. Look how cool it's been getting in the morning. This morning, it was one of the coolest for southwestern British Columbia. Merritt, the other side of zero. You saw that actually once on the weekend, and then this morning, first time getting into the freezing mark. Vancouver, 5.1 was our morning temperature. So yes, quite the diurnal swings through the day, if you will. And summer is sticking around through till Thursday. That's when that cold front sweeps through. We'll notice temperatures begin to drop on Thursday, but we keep the sun going in Vancouver until then. We'll see that rain through central and northern coastal sections, and the rain will get to us on Friday and into Saturday morning. And then it rebounds on Sunday, right back to summer weather. Look at those 20s on the south coast, potentially even mid-20s by next week. So no, we're not quite done with summer yet, even with the fall equinox happening Thursday evening. Lots of sun tomorrow across the province, as you can see. 17 up towards Williams Lake, 18 for Prince Rupert. Lovely across the island as well. A little bit of a humidity, and we could use the rain on the island. Still level 3 drought conditions. Looking for that rain on Friday, Leanne. That will feel so good with that 16. But again, not done with summer. That sneaky 23.
Sneaky 23.
Sneaky.
I love it. We're going to hang on to that last gasp of summer.
We all will.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The town of Smithers hosted a Grammy block party on Saturday to celebrate one of its hometown heroes. Alex Cuba won a Grammy in the spring for Best Latin Pop Album.
Let's maintain, love this community as a beautiful one.
Cuba is heavily involved in the Smithers community, where he advocates for art and music. Leading up to the block party, the Cuban-Canadian artist brought his Grammy around town so that fellow Smithereens, as they're called, could take selfies with it. A somber day of pomp, ceremony, and remembrance. The Queen was laid to rest today in England. We look back at the day next.
Some Toronto pubs opened before sunrise. Coffee flowing for the early morning funeral watchers.
We started at 5:30 in the morning in our hotel room because they started the viewing party here at 6:30 and it was not early enough.
On the wall, sandwiched between screens showing her funeral, a photo from Elizabeth's coronation in 1953. For Marie Michelle Siu, a reminder of a trailblazer.
She was not a spouse, a wife attending a +1 attending events in the 60s and 70s. She was the head of state, and just how much the world has changed since that time. And it just gives me the chills to think what she has seen and what she has gone through.
A loyal party of one at Mississauga's Celebration Square.
I just felt it was more respectful rather than getting up and watching it in my pajamas. To me, it felt I had to be here.
Barbara Weber moved to Canada many years ago, but says her heart remains in England with the late Queen.
She was loved by everybody. It's hard for people to understand if you're not British. It's just something that we all love her.
The same last post that sounded at the funeral echoed at a ceremony for the Queen outside Toronto City Hall. The solo trumpeter who performed it says he's played for the Queen several times before, but this last tribute felt more personal.
You never really thought about it until it happened, and then it hit me, and it more emotional than I thought it would be.
At 1 p.m., bells tolled across the GTA, like the one at Old City Hall, tolling once per minute 96 times to mark the late Queen's age at death, kicking off a provincial moment of silence. The mayor laying a bouquet of flowers for the Queen at a place she herself dedicated on her 1984 visit to the city. In a metropolis known for its hustle, transit paused for 96 seconds, a deafening halt to honor the late monarch. At the East York Civic Center, 3 legions united to remember the Queen.
She touched so many hearts. And now we're here to say goodbye. So goodbye, Queen.
Ken Buchanan says the Queen inspired him to join the Legion, and he spoke to her on Zoom a few months ago as part of the Special Olympics.
We talked about Special Olympics, how we can make it better for the world, how we can make people feel like they're wanted.
He says that's a legacy he'll never say goodbye to. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto. It has been a long day of solemn ceremonies marking the death of the Queen.
Her state funeral was held today in Britain. Thousands of dignitaries attended from around the world, and along the route that led from the funeral service to Westminster Abbey to her final resting place at Windsor Castle, thousands more people gathered to pay their final respects. Here are some of your final looks at the sights and sounds of the day.
We gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world to mourn our loss. To remember her long life of selfless service and ensure confidence, to commit her to the mercy of God, our Maker and Redeemer.
O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?
Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you.
Service in life, hope in death. All who follow the Queen's example and inspiration of trust and faith in God can with her say, we will meet again.
Go forth upon thy journey from this world, O Christian soul, in the name of God the Father Almighty, who created thee, in the name of Jesus Christ, who suffered for thee, in the name of the Holy Spirit, who strengtheneth thee.
And thanks for being with us tonight on CBC News at 6 on this day that will be remembered centuries to come. We'll leave you with scenes from the Queen's procession in Victoria.